Hi there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today's video is going to be about what can we do with our napkins or our serviettes, what can we put them over top of, and these are pretty much going to be stuff that you can find around your craft room, if not just around your household. So have a look and see how we can kind of jazz up these serviettes to make these into some card fronts. I have 3 different kinds here, and on purpose I have some designs that have a little bit more white than others, just so that we can also let the patterns from behind shine through. So the first one here, this is a grid mat, I think from maybe a stamping platform that I've had in the past. I found this, it was pretty bent. I put it under some heavy books for a couple of days and thought I really must use this up because no point wasting something like that, but we can use it in lots of different ways. The next are some old gel prints. These are pulls from a jelly plate. And then last but not least is good old patterned paper. So from here, I am just going to kind of have a bit of a look through. This is kind of full of scraps and things like that. And this orange one might go with some of the flowers I have. I'm not sure. I'll work on it in a little bit. First of all, one thing I think we need to do to some of these patterns, bearing in mind that when we put the serviettes over top, this pattern is really going to shine through. So I have some white gesso. I'm going to add a little bit of water, just a little bit, less is more, and water down this just a little bit, and this is kind of what I call knocking it back. I want to knock back the pattern just a little bit and make it not so in the forefront because I will show you some comparisons in just a minute of what it looks like if you don't do this. But you can use some white acrylic paint. If you want it to have a little bit of color, then go ahead and add a little bit of a different colored acrylic paint or a couple of drops of re-inker or something into the white paint or the white gesso, and that way you'll be able to tint it. But I'm going to go through with all of these and add a little bit of this watered down gesso mix. This is something we often do to push the background into the background because some of these prints are bright, they are bold, and they are pretty strong colors. So as I said, I want to use these up instead of throwing them out or just having them sit there and kind of do nothing. So when something is in my stash and it sits there for long enough, I tend to look at it and figure out a way that I'm going to use this. So this is the orange piece of paper that I chose from the paper pad, and at the moment I know it looks like I'm kind of blanking out the background, but I promise once this dries it won't be quite as white as what it appears at the moment. There I just had that little chunk, so I wanted to water it down a little bit and add a little bit more water just so that we can see the pattern through it. But this is kind of just an experiment, and as I said, you'll see in a second the difference between doing this and not doing this. I got some on my desk, of course, because I didn't put anything down to protect my surface. Now this is once they are pretty much dry. Things in my craft space have to dry pretty fast usually. Now this is the first piece here, and as you can see I have chosen this gorgeous napkin, this flower print. Now of course there are 4, but I'm going to trim this down. I've already used part of this one for a different thing and I just usually put them back in the packet and use them later on. With serviettes you need to remember that there is usually 2 or 3 layers to them. So you want to peel off all of the layers except for the first, the patterned layer. And I am going to be using some multi-medium in the matte finish. You could also use some PVA glue, just any kind of white craft glue is going to work, anything that dries clear. I used the PVA in a couple of videos ago and it works perfectly fine. I do love my matte medium. I do really like how it goes on. A little bit goes a really long way in comparison to the white glue. And so I'm going to pop some down where I added that white gesso to begin with. So you can see I only did part of my pattern, and then the other bit around the outside, it is just going to be scraps. So once I have got down one layer of my matte medium, then I pop my napkin down, and then I add another layer over top, and this needs to dry. For this one here, I want to have more of that white part in the middle so that you can attempt to see some of the background through here. So I'm actually going to kind of cut this one on a really weird angle. I just want to make sure that I glue it down in the right place. So I want to get both of the flowers at the top and the bottom, rather than kind of just using a square of the napkin otherwise. So that's why I've cut it down kind of weird. But anyway, we're going to pop it on using exactly the same technique. As I said, this matte medium. This matte medium is actually the one that I pop into my glue bottles. This is my everyday glue. This is a really strong glue. and it dries completely clear, no sheen, no shine to it. And so that is my favorite thing about this. It glides on absolutely beautifully, and as I said, it's really strong. So I know that once this is down, the corners and the edges of the napkin, even once I cut them, are not going to peel up. And that's important to me, that this card is going to last when I give it to the recipient. Now this is the jelly print here, and I have my final napkin or serviette, depending on what you call them, pop down my final layer of glue, and then I just put a really nice thin even layer, pop my serviette down, and then I kind of like flatten it out with my hands a little bit. I find it goes on nicely like that, and then add a layer of glue on top. You don't want to fuss around too much, because obviously with a wet napkin then you are going to run the risk of tearing it. It's going to tear really easy, so just pop your layer on and wait until they are dry. Then this is once they are all dry, and I wanted to show you a couple of comparisons. I think it's important because obviously it's really easy to see the pattern through there, but you forget that that gesso step at the very beginning actually made a really big difference. Now here's one that I did where I did not do that stage, where I didn't knock it back, and you can kind of see the difference in between where I did add the gesso and the one on the left which had no gesso added at all. This one here again is one that I did, and this was a print that was admittedly a little bit more bold, but my point is here, these are exactly the same napkin on top, and you absolutely lose the print in the background if the background is too bold. So exactly the same napkin, and admittedly the first example was exactly the same, whereas this one is not with the two gel prints, but you get the idea. And then this one here is just the patterned paper, which you can see through a little bit. It does definitely fall into the background for that one. Then to trim these down, I'm just using my guillotine trimmer. This is the 8.5 inch one from Tim Holtz, and I really like this one. Perfect size for my craft room. It's big enough to do all the jobs, but small enough to not take up too much room in my little space. And this is really just trial and error. I admit that it was hard to cut down this napkin just because there were kind of so many different parts of it that I felt like I could have really worked with. And so I did just keep trimming it down, until I had the right size that was going to work for my card base that day. I will also tell you that it is very easy to run these through your die cutting machine with dies. So if you had a rectangle die that you wanted to cut out, or any die of any shape and any pattern, then you can run it through your die cutting machine, and these die cut beautifully. I've got that coming up in another video as well. But there were the 3 cut down panels, and I'm just going to quickly pop these together. These are really kind of quick and simple cards that I popped together just because I was focusing on the backgrounds that you could put these serviettes over, and just saying you can have a look around your craft space, have a look and see what you've got, and you might be able to change it up and make it work to become a background to your napkin to give a little bit more than just whatever the napkin came as. This is the Happy Birthday set from Alina Crafts, and this is the Happy Birthday words as well as the background, the shadow, which I have die cut in Vellum. On the back of the white Happy Birthday, I have put some Stick It double-sided adhesive. Before I die cut these, I popped some on the back, then I die cut them out, and that way they just basically become a big sticker that I can stick down onto the vellum. Then I'm just going to put everything together. I have some new adhesives in the house finally. It's taken me a long time. I really worked hard to get through everything in my stash to use up absolutely everything before I ordered new ones. So I did order some new ones, and I wanted the tapes to be tearable tapes that you can just rip. And so I got some of the scrapbook.com adhesive, and I am loving that. I got it in a couple of different widths. And so I am just using up those things and experimenting with how they work best. But you could definitely just use some liquid glue. I chose to use the double-sided tape just because we had used the napkins, and I want to make sure it's all securely placed down onto my card base with like no gaps or bubbles or, you know, wrinkles or anything like that. So this one I think has enough. I just really like the simplicity of this one, so we're sticking with just the happy birthday sentiment, and that one is good to go. The next one here, I decided that I really like this kind of, it's almost a teal sort of colour. I don't really know how to, turquoisey maybe, mint coloured, and all I had was this little scrap. So I need to make this work for me. So I did cut this down into a card, like a layering panel. And then I have this Hooray die here from Spellbinders. I believe this was a freebie at some point from scrapbook.com that they threw in. They have lots of freebies often, little dies and all sorts of things. Lots of adhesives they usually have. Something you can throw in your cart if you are making an order as well. And so I am going to make the most of this one. I like it. It's pretty dainty. And I'm going to pop this on in the middle of my mint piece, because this is all I have. So I want to make the layer coordinate with what's going on in the middle. So to make this easy, as I said, the die is fairly dainty, so I'm going to add some Stick It double-sided adhesive onto the back of this mint piece. And I like this one. This is the one I use if I'm going to be die cutting things. If I'm not going to be die cutting it, then I will use the scrapbook.com double-sided adhesive. But I just run this through my Big Shot. And I'm actually going to run this through about 4 times because I want that big hooray, well in fact it's quite a small hooray die, and I'm going to make it as bold as I can by making it several layers thick. So I die cut it out 4 times, making sure I stayed in the center so that I can still use it for my layer. The best part here is that all I have to do is take off the remaining Stick It adhesive, and that way I don't have to add any more adhesive either. And that way I guess I'm using up all my scraps of what would have otherwise been around my die cutting. So that's a good feeling always too. Make sure everything is down onto my 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch card base. Then I really like the way that this one came out, given the kind of original design of the napkins. I like that I was able to kind of get some at the top and the bottom, and I like I've got that white space in the middle, which just really asks for the sentiment to be popped there. So I've got this gorgeous little hooray. It kind of goes up on an angle, and then just to finish off the little sentiment, I'm going to add one of the all occasions. This is from the Paper Rose all occasion sentiment set, and I'm just going to cut out that bit that says it's your birthday, so it will end up saying hooray, it's your birthday. And I just like the simplicity of this one, and really easy to put together. Because this has the Stick It adhesive on the back of it, all I have to do is take off the adhesive, place them down, and then press them into place to make sure that it has become permanent, and that is the next card good to go as well. As usual, if you are looking for any of the supplies, they are always listed below. You might have to click that little more button just down beneath the video. But other than that, there is a list of supplies that you can check things out, and a few more links and things, information for you if you are looking for it down there. But other than that, thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!